Okay, and I will happy welcome three panelist speakers who will share more about this topic. Let me introduce our first speaker, Mr. Roy, who has a vast experience in shipping, freight forwarding, and marine insurance, and Element Logistics, founder of Element Logistics, innovative freight forwarding company in Malaysia. He currently is a president of Lion Club KL Malaysia said. And our second speaker, we have Nazri Yahya, is a principal JB Skill Center. Book author, is also advisor to various universities, including Al Madinah University, Southern University, and University Kuala Lumpur. He has a plan to release a book soon, 2020, including its title of the Golden Age of the Dark Ages. And the third speaker, Mr. Khoo, is a project development advisory, agriculture, waste management, and sustainable tourism as a director, green renewable organic work called Growth Centers in Jammu. Allow me to kickstart with the webinar with the first topic of the day. And this first question I would like to ask Mr. Roy regarding on fear are growing that a worldwide economic downturn could be especially deep and lengthy, with recovery limited by continued uncertainty. How the global reaction toward this economic turn down? Please share your opinion.
Okay, first of all, thank you very much to MV International. Thank you, Jevan, for inviting me over to give this speech, or we call it a very so-called informal speech. So we have actually shifted our pattern from being on stage now to online. So
yeah,
so it's a little bit of different experience. Thank you very much for your question. We see that this economy crisis, because of this pandemic, and also the reactions from different parts of the world, they give actually basically quite a very uniform kind of reaction, whereby everyone is saying that it is actually very bad for the economy, and they are actually hurting. A lot of economies and a lot of industries are actually hurting. While we always hear about the cons, we always hear about the negative aspects. Every day, probably we are bombarded with a lot of negative things like, oh, this industry is going down, that industry is going down. We have a lot of data and facts to back up this very negative kind of feel. I will also share some of them that are not too bad. Not everything is negative. There are also positive reactions towards this pandemic. And some of people, they have even gained from this pandemic crisis. So not all is lost and not all is hurt. So I will just share on a very nutshell of this current situation. Now, this pandemic, basically, this is a very human to human kind of scenario that all of us are facing. As long as there is a human interaction, businesses will not go as normal, and whatever is normal can't be normal anymore. So businesses will feel the pain. Recession is actually in place right now, and what we call it as a deep freeze current economic crisis now. The whole economy, the whole world is facing a deep freeze. And yet, to some investors, to some people, to some businesses, they see it as an opportunity. They see it as very short-lived. While everyone is rushing to go over and win this war with new vaccines, I think it will take some time. So basically, while we are all waiting for a very powerful vaccine, a very effective vaccine, we should all do our part to understand the whole structure of how this what they call this bug, this virus going to cause our life. Going to be revolving around us. I'll just give a very snapshot of what is happening basically in Malaysia and then worldwide. Following IMF, the World International Monetary Foundation, the world economy will experience the worst recession since Great Depression. So this will be the worst that the world will see, after the Great Depression. International Labour Organization (ILO) expects a 1.25 billion jobs that will be affected. 1.25 billion jobs will be badly affected, and that amounts to about 38% of the workforce. They risk pay cut, they risk retrenchment, they also risk getting themselves laid off. This is very particular, especially in the tourism industry, hoteling, accommodation industry, the manufacturing, the wholesale industry, and also the real estate, and not forgetting the construction industry. The people will be greatly affected, and basically that we can see that people will call this as a great lockdown that will affect the whole world itself and not only one country. There won't be countries spared, and the figures will be very high in sense of losses. I just pick up the fact that comparing these 08, we also had a very so-called we had an economy crisis in 2008-2009. A lot of analysts says that it is actually just a very dry run, or it was just a very small percentage of loss compared to right now. In 2009, there was actually a negative 0.1 growth, negative. So comparing to 2020 COVID-19 pandemic, there is actually a negative 3 percentage growth the whole world. And that actually is amounting to US dollars 9 trillion. 9 trillion that this loss is actually being projected, and this is in US dollars. Probably some of our calculators will not be able to tabulate the USD 9 trillion loss unless you have a proper 12-digit calculator. So basically, the damage is very big. The unemployment rate, I'm going to touch about Malaysia right now. Unemployment rate will actually grow to 4%. It was actually from March 2019, it was only 3.4%. So it's expected to grow to 4%. We are already about 3.9% unemployment rate right now. So basically, we will see an unemployment number from 525,000 will rise up to close to 650,000. So that is another 100,000 unemployed people. Is actually a burden for the economy and burden for the country. However, but like I say, all is not lost. Even though we have all these very scary figures, there are a lot of business that are actually thriving from it right now. When you ask about the reactions, I think that some of the businesses are smiling. Some of them are really cashing in right now, especially businesses that are on electronic platform. The businesses that requires online, their businesses went up tremendously, not little bit, but went up tremendously. Those internet cable TV, for example, like Netflix, they went up USD 700. It was 709 million in gross profit, so amounting to a US 5.8 billion sales. So their sales actually recorded easily more than 100% growth. We see a lot of F&B, they are also doing pretty well because the number of takeaways surged very highly. because of the e-platform. Pizza companies, you know, they had actually a very high rate of delivery, very high rate of takeaway. So their businesses actually went up pretty high. Previously, the pizza delivery are for like families, you know, for events and so on, for meetings and so on. But now everyone is ordering it from home. We also see that you know, the agriculture industry, previously they I think in March they reduced their labor workforce. They actually shrunk by 33%. Fishery department 21.1%. Arts and entertainment, they also shrunk by 38%. These are figures of people losing their jobs, and also figures of the businesses that are on average they shrunk due to this pandemic. But with all the technology, with all the IT, what do you call this platform, it has actually turned around some of the businesses that are fast to adapt to technology. They have been very busy right now. I know one seller selling veggie. Previously, he only distribute to shops. Right now, he caters for online selling veggies online, and also through, you know, the social media and so on. He is so busy, and basically he is actually employing a few more people to help him out in the business. So his business didn't shrink. In fact, his business went up pretty well. Yeah. So well, this is my take, and I believe that the economy, especially in Malaysia, I've just heard over this Bank Negara, our governor reported a moderately 0.7% growth. Well, it's nothing to shout compared to a 3.6% growth in the Q4 of last year. But at least we are not in the negative zone as compared to global worldwide. Global is a -3. We are probably recording a 0.7, still recording a positive 0.7 moderate growth. So Malaysia, we are not too bad for time being, given that we have actually shifted our agriculture businesses to industrialized and service sector businesses. So we are still fairly doing fairly well compared to other nations that probably they are still struggling on the health system right now. Yeah. So this is my take.
Okay, that's great. And there any additional comment from Mr. Nazri or Mr. Khoo, at least can input for on the part of what Roy saying, some bad economy, negative things and positive things one side. This is humankind different, something that you all have in ideas that you all can add on into its topic, that you have something answer you can share to us.
I think if you allow me, Jevan, I'd like to actually I want to start a new club, the Disneyland Grants and Passport Club.
Okay.
Okay. This is something that which I'm very proud of, because I'm the only one in Malaysia, I believe, until now, is the one that completed all the six Disneylands in the world, in Orlando, in Anaheim, in Paris, Shanghai, Tokyo, and Hong Kong. Okay, all is not lost. Is because why? To pick up what Roy said just now, is when all is not lost is because this is the best time for us to go and visit Disneylands. Shanghai just opened just a few days ago. They are only allowing 30% visitors to come in. You don't have to wait the long queue that I've been experiencing all the while. And it's very safe now. Rides are all limited. Theaters, all those theaters are closed. The nighttime spectacular is a little bit closed now. But the Shanghai parks will be strictly clean, and first will be around, and you have all this opportunity to get the rides in the lesser time than you expected. Okay, there's a little bit on that. But again, I also like to add on what Roy mentioned now. Bank Negara mentioned, the governor of Bank Negara said you have a 0.7% growth this year. Okay, it can only happen when every one of us help to spend the money. For example, now the I Lestari, the 500 ringgit EPF contribution allowed by withdrawal allowed by the government. Right? If you take out the money, spend it, help, tolong Makcik Kia, because Makcik Kia is selling the kuih at the roadside. Without that money, it's hard for her to sustain life. Okay, I think that's all for me.
Yeah, if I may, thanks Roy for your presentation and Nazri for your comment about Disneyland. Yes, it's a good time to go now, I agree.
Yeah.
The point I like to add is that I think what we have to be observing and to be very careful is that the policy response by all the governments to the economic situation caused by the COVID-19 pandemic is that they're all borrowing money to provide all these stimulus or what they call this relief packages. And they are borrowing money to the extent of increasing the fiscal deficit, sometimes to even more than 10% of the GDP. So a lot of these public debt levels are very high already, if not unsustainable. So we have to be very concerned about that. For example, I think what we have 750 million in the Malaysian context, ringgit. So where's that money going to come from? From taxes? From all revenues are all down, that's for sure. So that's got to be something we have to look out for. Secondly, the private sector households and companies, the private sector debts are going to rise. Private households and companies will not be able to sustain their inflow, cash flow. So that could be massive defaults and bankruptcies. This is certainly an indicator we have to look out for. So together, this might slow down the economic growth, as you pointed out, and any recovery will be prolonged because of this. Because you take on so much debt, both at the national level, at the household and corporate level, you have less for investment and growth later on. So you have an issue there. That's my limited take for the moment. Thanks.
Okay, that's great. And what Nazri was telling is EPF withdrawal, like Makcik Kia, like what is Mr. Khoo was saying, policy response by borrowing money. This is much concern. Okay, that's and to audience who are listening, you all can list down your questions, and you can. Mr. Nara will take it, our conference chairman will take the question and he will share to later when we have a section for audience. Please share your question in writing up and send it to Mr. Nara with taking the question. Okay, we move on to Mr. Nazri for the second question. Okay, about the losses to the company. The question is losses of companies many are already saturated with a heavy debt. What are risks triggering a financial crisis and cataclysmic corporation? What you think can looking into like the heavy debts and risks on the financial? Mr. Nazri.
Okay, debts. Debts is one favorite word of Malaysian. Who in Malaysia don't have debts?
Yeah.
Okay, it's a matter of big or small. Okay, let's how to address it. Let's go with the simple way. We go with the example of Makcik Kia also, and Surjit Kaur and our own Uncle Tony Fernandez. Okay, Makcik Kia, the roadside business. She sells kuih. She sells kuih. Every day she wakes up about 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock in the morning, prepares the kuih, And by 6:30, 7 o'clock, she's already by the roadside selling kuih, three pieces for RM1 in JB, maybe 2 pieces for RM1 in KL, something like that. If she's in KL, she's 2 for RM1. But ever since we started the MCO 2 months back, she has zero business. She has zero business. And she's earning 30 to 40 ringgit net profit per day. How can she sustain to pay her bank loans, her housing loan, car loan, and to pay for to buy fish, to buy rice, and to feed the table when she cannot get the 20 to 30 ringgit profit per day? Yeah, of course, maybe the husband is working, but we're talking about one single lady here. Okay. From the data that I saw, Malaysia household debt to GDP is about 83%, 2019 Bank Negara data. It's lower from South Korea and Hong Kong and Thailand, but we are weaker to Japan, Singapore, and China. Most of the debts goes to the properties. 54% of the debts goes to the properties. And so whatever Mak Cikia and her husband buys, gets money, 50% of what they earn goes to payment of housing loans. And the rest, the balance is on motor vehicles, personal finance, and others. Small example, if a person who earns 20, 30 ringgit cannot pay her good loan, eventually become bad loan. And that's one example. We are talking about 200, 300,000 of Mak Cikia and Pakcik Saleh around Malaysia here, selling kuih. Okay, again, our Prime Minister uses the example of Surjit Kaur. Surjit Kaur, SME doing furniture, rabut. Surjit Kaur got 15 workers. And again, for the past 3 months, the SMEs in Malaysia is unable to operate, people cannot come to work. There is no productions, there are no demands. We cannot export, the locals are not buying. And most importantly, they don't have cash for the last 3 months, except from the government incentives, government grant, micro, whatever. This one is different. Without the help from the government, they die. And when SME die, we are talking about 70% job loss, because SME contribute about 70% of jobs in Malaysia. And we're also talking about the shrinkage of our GDP, because again, SME contributes about 40% of our GDP contribution. Okay? So, well, it creates another chain reaction. If a Surjit Kaur cannot pay the salary, the workers cannot pay for the bank loans. Even if they have savings, most of the savings will go to put food on the tables. The bank will be left behind. Okay. Right. Lastly, I think let's take a look at the example of our uncle Tony Fernandez. Tony Fernandez, owner, founder of Asia. According to the IATA statistics, airline is expected to lose about 113 billion. 113 billion US dollars. It's not small amount for the airline as well, because in the world now goes under voluntary or involuntary administration. We saw Virgin Australia, Ethiopia Airlines. I used to fly Ethiopia Airlines. They are good, but now they're grounded. Nation Airlines, Singapore Airlines, 95% of Singapore Airlines are all grounded. Aircrafts are all grounded. And our own Malindo now not doing well. And of course, Asia, they have cut salaries and other things. But again, let's look into the economy of the Asia. I have here the statistics of Airbus prices. Asia uses two types of aircrafts, Airbus A320 and Airbus A320 Neo. One Airbus A320 costs about 100 million US dollar each, and Asia has about 100 units. Straight line, using a straight line depreciation, 100 units of Airbus A320 at 100 US dollar per unit, loan for 10 years at 6% interest rate. You're talking about per month, Asia has to pay about 500 million ringgit just to pay for the lease, the loan for the aircrafts. How for aircrafts to sustain? That's why you see reports now, many aircraft companies in the world, they are grounding their aircrafts. They are seeking loans from the government, help from the government to assist them. I even have one friend, a lady pilot from Emirates. She just got a termination letter yesterday. Not yesterday, sorry, last week. She got 3 months severance pay. That's not enough. But because Emirates sponsored for her pilot license, she has to pay back to Emirates $250,000. Okay, right. Okay, because we're talking about debts here, I just want to share also, Bank Negara has a statistics that we have a 1.7 trillion loans outstanding as of now, as of 2019. The nations are tightening the belt, but again, the priority would always be to put a food on the table. It's not to pay the bank loans. So it's a little bit alarming. That's why I supported, to be really honest, I supported the Malaysian government to so-called end this MCO, allow industries to work and get people back on their track to earn some money. Okay, just one more facts. Bursa Malaysia, we have about 800 companies in Bursa Malaysia. As of February 2020, 597 companies have cash less than the short-term dues, meaning to say they may not be able to service the loans. 223 companies have interest ratio below of 1, meaning to say that earnings before tax and earning before interest and tax cannot cover their interest expenses. It's really bad for a listed company. And 321 companies registered losses as of February. In conclusion, what I can say, we have to continue to generate income. If not, companies cannot pay salary. Makcik Kia cannot sell kuih. Sarjit Kaur cannot sell furniture. Sarjit Kaur also cannot export her furniture. And she also cannot pay for her worker salary. And Tony Fernandez cannot fly his red toys. And we may see some shaking in the banking sector in 6 months from now. Okay.
Okay, that's great. That's great. Because what you are sharing about from Nazri, I can see like that big, small, zero businesses, bank loan, many loans, no production, GDP shrinking, and dying airlines debts, and trillion loans by BNM, Machika, all these things. And what about Mr. Khoo or Mr. Roy? What do you think about on this kind of a debt on other side, big and small, zero businesses like Machika, Surjit, Tony Fernandez, and what your side you are thinking that additional input that you would like to share?
Yeah, if I can start off first, in terms of business, I feel the great risk is that of deflation. That means depressed prices. This crisis is also causing a very massive slack in goods demand. and labor markets employment. So price collapse will seem to be another factor we need to observe. In commodities, when you have low prices, means less revenues for the commodity trading and producing countries like Malaysia, industrial metals, oil. So all these may lead to again further cases of insolvency. So we prolong the depression, the recession as a result.
Do you think this, Mr. Khoo, I have from your side, do you think this is going to be a short term or you been on a long term? Because as you say, as a price collapse, there's another part is a good demand. But I'd like to see what is you was thinking on that side.
Can I answer that question when it comes to my turn? I have a long answer for that.
Okay, no worries. That's great. What about Roy on the from the Nazri part? Any?
I just add a little bit more. In fact,
that's great.
Yeah, thanks. In fact, a lot of countries, they have lowered down the interest rate because coming to Nazri's answer just now, the government wants people to spend money. So that's why they have the federal government, I think around the world, they have actually reduced the interest rates so to spur up the economy, to let people spend money. However, there is actually a what they call there's always two sides of a coin. Some people will say, hey, okay, the government wants you to spend money, but a lot of people on a personal note will say you better save money for rainy days. We do not know what is going to happen. So I guess we as let's put in a Malaysian context, we do not want to like just spend money unnecessarily, but for those people in Malaysian context, even banks right now, they are. I realize Maybank is doing something to help support the local economy. Coming back to this, whatever Makcik Kia or this uncle in the kopitiam, support back the local industry, whereby as easy as like you can actually buy or purchase foods from a local seller. You can actually buy from a local producer. Anything that is Malaysian, buy Malaysian things first. Anyhow, our quality, Malaysian quality, our produce, we are quite okay. Our quality is quite good. No harm to support local first. So that is one thing to actually spur up the economy, to actually help the local people. I've already seen a lot of last time, probably 2 years back, you see a lot of big companies like McDonald's, KFC, or Nando's doing a lot of delivery, through online platform. They are one of the first players to do a lot of online delivery. But right now, a lot of online platform, they also cater to hawker store. Even the kopitiam or in the mama can even do a online delivery. You want a mee goreng or Indomie, Indomie, you can actually get it online. So this is actually helping bits by business the economy on a very local scale. Yeah. So this is my contribution.
Okay. Further, we move on to Mr. Khoo. Questions. How long the effect this pandemic will last is? What is your opinion, and what are your thought that effect this pandemic will be referred to all the mothers of all financial crises? And Mr. Khoo, it's your turn.
I forgot to unmute myself. Thank you, Jevan. Thank you for inviting me to speak as a panelist in this inaugural webinar from MV. Very good opportunity. First of all, I'd like to say, as to your question, how deep this and how long this recession will last. I think that's the $64 billion or $64 trillion question asked around the world. Everybody wants to know how long will this last. I just want to make the following points first, citing a few references. JP Morgan estimates that this pandemic could cost the world in economic terms $5.5 trillion in lost output over the next 2 years. If you can't put your hands around or head around this figure, this is like losing the annual output of Japan in 1 year. That means take away Japan from the world economy and it's lost forever, never to be got back again. So there's almost 8% of GDP from the whole world through the end of next year. And the cost to developed countries is almost the same as that of the recessions of 2008, 2009, and 1974 and 1975, the last two recessions that we had. So with this, we have, in response to this, as we mentioned earlier, all the governments pumping in money and putting in fiscal stimulus to revive the economy, to shoulder the burden and the impact of this crisis. But it is still not likely, according to JP Morgan, to return back to normal by 2022. That's 2 years from now. So this is the estimate of JP Morgan. The Bank of International Settlement also warned that all these efforts, to reopen the economy could lead us to a worst case scenario. We have a second wave of the virus coming back. And you could have GDP in the US losing by 12%. And that's even worse than the last Great Recession of 28 and 29. And we already see about 14 million jobs being lost in the US. And the estimate by Oxford Economics is that you could go to 20 million jobs by later this year. And you must remember, the Great Depression, we had something like 25% of all jobs lost. That is in the 1930s. So we are really reaching that goal, not goal, the result. And the emerging economies, that includes Malaysia, we are all exporters of commodities, so we all be affected. And we're looking at perhaps a commodity price collapse in the global trade, like we have not seen since 1930s. Now, this is a really bad scenario building up. And when you talk about commodities, oil is already one of those, through the reduced demand from lack of consumption or lower consumption. And when you look at it from the IMF and World Bank point of view, nearly half of the world's nations, 60, have sought to apply for World Bank programs for loans and assistance. And these two institutions, IMF and World Bank, they have put together resources up to $1.2 trillion to battle this fallout. And this is very small compared to even countries like what the US is attempting. And let's look at the stock markets. 96 billion has flowed out of emerging markets. And that's 3 times more than the 26 billion that flowed out in the Great Recession 10 years ago. Can you imagine that? 3 times more have already departed from emerging markets in the last 3 months compared to the scale 10 years ago. So there is a bit of optimism that once this lockdown is over, the world economy will bounce back again with pent-up demand. People will be back at work. Households will, spend like never before. Companies will take their staff and take on staff and so forth, and then we'll be back to normal. But this scenario, or this is the best case scenario. But what I like to look at is something closer. When Jevan asked me to talk about this topic, I picked this because this is something I've been studying for the last 30 years now. I was one of those people who anticipated the Great Depression of 1990, according to the quantitative long-wave cycles that happens every 60 years. So if you Google, you see this topic, 60-year cycles that go on for 4 cycles before that, and it is studied by a Russian economist, Kondratev. Unfortunately, he was shot dead by Stalin because he refused to predict that the Western economy, the capitalist economy, will collapse after the Great Depression. So he was a martyr for Western economics. Now, I want to make a definition here. A recession, as you all know, who study Economics 101, is defined as negative growth rate for 2 successive quarters, usually referred to as a short phase in a longer business cycle that lasts for 8 to 10 years. And you know, a business cycle is due to inventory buildup, and then you have a slump in demand and all that kind of stuff. Now, a depression, and a lot of people are asking, is this going to be as bad as the depression in 1990? A depression, we must realize, is defined as nothing less than the collapse of the financial sector. Now, let that sink in for a moment. A depression is fundamentally different now from a recession. In a depression, the financial sector collapses. Everything that is traded on paper, financials, equities, debts, derivatives, all that is collapsed. All right. So how much of an effect depression, the financial sector collapse has on the economy depends on how much the economy depends on the financial sector in the first place. You all know that the real sector and the financial sector are closely intertwined. One cannot live without the other. But in certain economies, the financial sector takes on a very large chunk of the growth. Paper trades, derivatives, pump priming, money markets make up a big chunk of the economic growth. So those economies that depend on the financial sector greatly will suffer the effects of a depression greatly when the financial sector collapses. So, you know, the difference is in the real sector, you have fundamentals, actual trade and growth in materials, goods, and services. So if the real sector of an economy like, let's say Malaysia is strong, you depend a lot of palm oil, manufacturing, construction, commodities, then you're fine. You don't depend so much on the financial sector. So if the financial sector collapses, only the people employed in the financial sector will suffer. The real growth goes on. The market selling nasi lemak will still be able to sell nasi lemak because I and you will also will buy the nasi lemak. We don't buy shares, but we need to buy nasi lemak. All right. So if the last 10 years have been driven by speculative economy and activities, then a depression is waiting to happen. You know, let's say like economy in the US or in the Europe. So the economy is like a bubble growing over 10 years, and it just needs a trigger like the coronavirus pandemic to burst the bubble. You know, then the stock market crashes. This is what happened in 1930. The stock market crashed and the crisis of confidence begins. Now, what happened between 1930 and now is because the 1930 didn't have the right fiscal tools, the right monetary tools, and no safety net. Whereas now everybody is wiser. Paul Krugman has been a student of long wave economics and the Great Depression of 1930s for the longest time. He himself predicted that there could be a depression coming. In fact, there is a school of thought that the recession of 2008-2009 is actually the beginning of depression, and it is only kept up because of the very loose monetary policy of the US from the Obama years to the Trump years, tax cuts and a lot of pump priming. So all this money goes into the economy, but unfortunately what happened in the US, the money went into corporations, and the upper 1%, as you know, the income inequity in the US is very high. And the rich get richer, the poor get poorer. And the capitalist economy, which has been devised in this format, has suppressed wages. Everybody is getting lower and lower in terms of real wages. And so what happens is that they actually, in a lot of observation, as they kick the can down the road, and the structural problem was already there. They just deferred it until the next burst, and we are now witnessing the next burst. So, you know, what we have been experiencing is a cushioning of the effect by the governments. Now, how does the government do this? The government borrows money. In the case of the US can print as much money as it wants because it's the world's reserve currency. Basically, it's borrowing money from you, me, and everybody to pump up the US economy. The minute there's no more confidence in the US economy, then there will be a collapse. And that's the fundamental truth. And we see things happening like in China now, the digital yuan is being introduced. It could be potentially the reserve currency. I think the yuan is now becoming one of the key currencies in the global basket currencies. So how much confidence the world has in the US as a reserve currency will determine whether it can continue to print money. The relief for the US was something like $2 trillion so far in the last 3 months. Now, Nancy Pelosi, the Speaker of the House, has proposed a $3 trillion rescue package. Altogether, that's $5 trillion US dollars. I cannot imagine what is $5 trillion US dollars. That's a lot of money. Not that they have the money, they are borrowing the money from the rest of the world, and in terms of the US, from their future generations to try to cushion the effect of this particular downturn. Now, if, let's say, the US can achieve growth in the next 1 or 2 years to match that kind of borrowing, to pay back that kind of borrowing, well and good. So the question is whether it can actually achieve that kind of growth or not. Now, the US economy, the Western economies have been the engine of growth for the world economy, engine of growth. And what happens is that if they are growing, and their growth have been consumption-based, and in terms of productivity, they have not been actually growing. No doubt you have what they call the internet companies, the big giants like Facebook, Amazon, FAANG, all Netflix and Google, all these big economies driving the growth, including Apple. The real fact is that a lot of other sectors in the economy are not doing so well, and growth has been actually experienced more in the East Asian and the other parts of the world. So we are seeing a lot of disparities now around the world, and the question is whether this kind of growth can be sustained, and if not, then we have a long path ahead of us for recovery. So I would like to just end by saying that if the recession is in fact recognized as a depression, the real sector actually continues to operate. The farms will still go on. The SMEs, I'm going to add, will still provide goods and services for people in the local economies. We won't have long range supply chains. Hyper local economies might be supply chains might be more in effect coming around, and we will see how the countries respond. They will affect their recovery. If they invest a lot more in productive assets and technologies, we see a faster growth. Like in Malaysia's case, if let's say the digital economy takes off very fast, we may have a shorter rebound. And this requires a lot of restructuring, retraining, reorientation, and how well and how quick we learn. It's the capacity of the economy and the country and the population to absorb this, to reinvent itself, that determines whether we will bounce out of this faster or take longer. Okay, I think that's my my quick 5 or 10 minutes. I can't remember how long I did.
No worries. That's from your thought. Let me move on. Questions coming on board. Let me give it to Mr. Nara. Can you shout out the questions to the received question to us?
Yes, sure, Jevan, thank you very much. I think we've been getting quite a number of interesting questions. The first one is from Mr. Charles Chong, and he says, hi Roy, since you are also a president of an NGO, how do you all do fundraising, being that you can't do fundraising events, dinner, and any other outdoor activities during this time? Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much for the question, Mr. Charles. Yes, in a matter actually, not only businesses are affected, NGOs and charity organization is also part of affected due to this pandemic, because one of the things that we are no longer to raise funds. Normally how a charity organization, they raise funds is through dinner, through the public outdoor activities, donations that we do outside. So a lot of NGOs have actually resorted, and thank God, luckily we have the online system right now. We are all on the IT platform compared to probably the Great Depression period, whereby there's no any IT technology involved. we have been very active through online social media. For example, how do we raise fund? Right now, we are raising fund, for example, for a very poor family area, probably about 100 households. So some of them, they have some very good creative activity. So what we did is we are actually organizing a MCO online singing contest. So what the participants need to do is that they probably contribute 50 ringgit, and then the 50 ringgit will proceed to charity cost 100%. The other thing, some of them are doing the fundraising right now. They are doing the Hari Raya cookies and so on. So basically, it's all through media platform, through Facebook, through Instagram, and then of course through our group chat, the WhatsApp, and so on. So I think it has helped a lot on charity ground, and this is also the way that we don't have to waste a lot of food, because most of the time, this when we organize a gala dinner, when we organize a lot of events, there's a lot of wastage, especially food and also resources. Doing this online saves a lot of this kind of thing. And the other day, my experience was that when we actually posted online, we had even better response. People like from restaurants, they have leftover. They say, "Hey, can you guys come and pick it up? And you can contribute the food over to the poor family, the affected ones." So it has actually reached people that we do not know before that, and actually went past the what they call the fundraising target. So, Mr. Charles, I hope that I answer your question. Thanks.
Okay, Mr. Nara, can you move on to other question do you have on your side?
Yeah, sure. Thank you, Roy. Here's a question from Professor Dr. Geeta Subramaniam, and this may be addressed to Nazri, but others could also answer. So, foreign workers contribute a lot to our economy, immaterial whether they are legal or illegal. When it comes to testing for COVID-19, they ask the employers to pay for it. As it is, many employers are already affected by the pandemic. In my opinion, the government should use the levy they have charged to either subsidize or pay for the testing. What's your take on this? Thank you.
In the first place, I thank you again, Mr. Nara, for the question, and Professor for the for the question. In the first place, I am not the government. I cannot decide, but my take is, yeah, what happened to the foreign levy? Okay, the workers are here. They are not working. Most of them are not working, but I'm not thinking of it's the duty for the government to test all the foreign workers. I do agree with our Director General of Health, Dr. Isham, to do selective testing. We cannot be testing everyone. We have 34 million people in Malaysia. We have I don't know, maybe 4 million legal workers, foreigners in Malaysia, and 3 million illegal workers in Malaysia. We cannot be testing everyone. It will cost a bump, lots of money. Okay? So my take is we do selective testing, not everyone. Okay.
Okay, Mr. Nara,
Thank
can
you.
you move
Yes,
on to the other
sure.
questions?
Thank you. Here's a question. Great sharing by everyone. Thank you. Which countries and which of their actions can we benchmark for our own economic recovery?
Anyone can give some thoughts on the question from observer was just saying. Anyone can give an answer?
I think the first and foremost concern is that of controlling or mitigating the pandemic. Public health has to come first. I think a lot of the countries that have led the way has been very good at prioritizing public health. A lot of countries are rushing to open up the economy because they're concerned about the economic effects of the economy on the economy of the virus. Nazri, I really totally agree with you that the B40 people are, I mean, the sector is really suffering a lot from the economic impact of the closure. And so there's a huge tendency for the government to open up and to make life easier for them. But public health comes first. There's no point if you have economic health if you don't have your own physical health.
Yeah.
Your physical health is more important than economic health. So the benchmark that I would refer to is to all the countries that have prioritized public health first. I can't name all the countries. I mean, a lot of them are in East Asia, but some of the other countries like in Europe and the US, they are facing a lot of pressure to open up the economy. And I think this is more in the US than in Europe. Because I don't know, in Europe, they have a long history of facing pandemics. I can tell you, every few hundred years, they have a massive pandemic. So their collective civilizational memory is very strong. In the US, not so much pandemic, so they don't really, realize how bad an effect it is like. But whatever it is, if even though it might be election year in the US and that might be no motivation, countries that prioritize the physical health, the public health, is what we should observe. And I think in Malaysia, we are doing that. We are doing that to a great degree. And in terms of the economic measures, putting selective sectors is a very good step. Not everything in one go. And we in this case, following on what Nazri has said on the testing, we need to be able to be very strong in the what they call it, contact tracing. And following the contact tracing of any cases that come out is the very targeted testing to make sure that people in certain groups are not affected. And then we can, control it much better. So this kind of activity gives the confidence for people to go out and do their economic activities much more. So there are a lot of guidelines or not the examples already to follow, and these are the few principles that I see coming forward.
Okay, that's great. That's good.
Jevan, can I add? Jevan.
Okay, go ahead, Mr. Nazri. What's on your side?
Okay, I again, because Mr. Khoo has been mentioning my name 2 times, I need to re-quote Mr. Khoo now. Okay, I do agree with you, Khoo, Mr. Khoo, that if you want to benchmark a country, the best one is the one that has the best public health policy. We take an example of China. Example, China, the COVID-19 was so-called started in China. We do not know the actual origin, but it was so-called started in China. And China already put on the massive lockdown, military enforcement that we do not see and whatever they did that. So what, unfortunately, that happened during the Chinese New Year. So some of it was out. But the one in Wuhan was controlled. And China is now almost back on track. China is now back on track. But the one that's not really care about the public health, like the US is, I have to quote US, they keep on blaming China. But what happened to them now? They don't have, well, of course, I agree with you, they don't have the experience to manage this pandemic, but now they have more than 1 million people getting affected by the COVID-19. Again, closer to us, my biggest worry is Indonesia. Indonesia is a one classic example whereby they value economy more than the public health. The testing rate is the lowest in South Asia. They only recorded not more than 10,000 cases of COVID-19 recorded, but the unrecorded, we don't know. We have maybe 250 million population of Indonesia, and less than 0.05% have been tested. I'm very worried about Indonesia. They will lose both economy and people. I hope they do something. I'm not too sure what they do, but for sure we have to do something now. Okay, back to you, Jevan.
Okay, that's your side. Okay, Mr. Nara, any more questions your side? Can you read it up for us?
Yes, we have a few more. There's a question here from Ms. Doris Padmini Selvaratnam. Since there are many layoffs in many sectors, will there be regulations to take local workers and not foreign workers?
This one is anyone from our speaker can give your thoughts and about the foreign worker and the local workers.
I can give this few take on this. The reason why we take foreign workers is because most of them are doing the jobs that the locals are not interested to do. We have them working in the plantations, we have them working at pump stations. Now we are seeing them working in 7-Elevens, etc. Our locals, I don't know, especially now, I'm not blaming, putting a blame, but especially the younger generations, Gen Z, they have different kind of expectation. They want high salary, they want air-conditional jobs, they want easy jobs, they want big bonuses, they want cars, they want condos fast. The layoffs, yeah, of course, you will see some layoffs here and there, but I still don't see the possibility for the locals to take over the foreigners in terms of the lower paying jobs. Nobody's doing that. You ask your son, your daughters, I don't think so. Everyone's in their mind, they want to be, last 5 years, 6 years, they want to be engineers, doctors, etc. But today they want to become instant famous. They want to become what I call it, a travel influencer. They want to become Instagram, Facebook, face, something like that. Not the normal jobs that they were working. The foreigners are doing that. Okay, back to you, Jevan.
Yeah. Anyone?
I'd like to.
Yeah. Okay, Mr. Khoo.
I'd like to tackle the second question on what is the trend regarding foreign direct investments. There are the two aspects to foreign direct investment. One is into the equities market, even into the into investments like not only equity but debt as well. But the other part is into the real sector, which is into construction, manufacturing, and all that. So the later one, foreign direct investment into construction, manufacturing, all that, will certainly be affected because it depends on the economic outlook, not only of Malaysia but around the world. If companies that are not doing well contract in terms of their reserves and expansion plans, you will not see much of that filtering out to Malaysia. So definitely there will be a downtrend in that regard. But what is more concerning to me is the foreign direct investments into our equities market. Now, as I mentioned earlier, the financial sector has been in play in the last 10 years and will still be in play, still around. In fact, one of the economists that I've been reading talk about the destruction of the capital sector. Whether you have the depression so bad that the capital sector is wiped out. This is almost Marxian approach. But the thing is this, if you do not have a result as bad as that, then it will be business as usual. What is happening is that the countries which have the financial sector will still continue to print and pump money into the economy, and then the money flows into the economy. And the problem is not so much the pump priming, but what kind of structure your economy has. Now, the money goes into the corporate sector. And if the corporate sector does not invest in productive assets, into technology, into capital investment, which will create jobs and manufacture goods, and it goes into speculative assets, property, and various things like commodity prices, then what we will see is that you will have inflation of these assets, and then you will have speculative tendencies. Now, this is what's been going on for the last 10 years. Like, for example, the $2 trillion that the US pumped into the US economy in the last 2 months, 1 trillion went into the corporate sector. And what did they do with the money? Did they keep their employees on the payroll? Did they buy back their shares? Did they reserve their funds to even invest in more assets? And in fact, you can argue that the money went back into the stock market, which is why the stock market recovered so quickly. You know, not because that the optimism is there in the next 2 years, but because the shares were cheap. And in this sense, if the funds come into Malaysia because the Malaysian stock market is low, then you can see that this kind of monetary movement is moving around. And there was a question that was posed to me many times, and that is, if there was a depression due in 1990, how come it didn't happen? We didn't see the effect of it as bad as 1930. Well, in 1930, it affected one country, the US, and then maybe the Europe. But what we have in 1990 was that we have the movement, globalization of finance around the world. Money flowed to Asia, then you had the Asian financial crisis, then money flowed back to the US, you had the savings and loan crisis, then money flowed back into Asia again, then you had the Tokyo bubble and the property problem, and then it flowed back to the US. So the money flows around the world into various stocks and exchanges, and you don't see the shock so much as before. But now this pandemic is happening globally all at the same time. So money flowing around the world got no place to hide. So this time around, it could be different. And then it could therefore be a problem. So a lot depends again on what the country does, not so much what the global financial cartel is doing.
Yeah, I think what Mr. Khoo is saying, then we need to print more money and keep it up stock in the house.
Only if you can afford it. Only if you can afford it.
Then we have to inform to the World Bank and can you bring more money? We need it because it's a time of this kind of situation. Okay, move on with Mr. Nara. Do you have any more questions on board?
Yeah, we are having a number of questions coming on board. I'm not
Can
sure
we
whether
take
we'll be able to.
two more questions and
Yes.
to audience, you all can stay back for a while with the last for final snapshots and other question we can we take two more questions.
Yes.
And other question you can jot it down and can email to us, and what we can do, we can get our speakers to answer as soon as possible, or we will email to you.
There's one.
Other two more questions, Mr. Nara.
Yes, one from Ms. Jayalakshmi Ramachandran. We can see from the history that each time there's pandemic, global recession, there are evidence of companies that claim going concern mainly due to governance violations, which escalates the impact of recession. What do you think must be the actions taken to ensure companies are behaving responsibly, making responsible investment, and how do you think the government can help to enhance better compliance? Do you think investments in frontier markets will be a boon or a bane?
I have a quick answer to that one. When the government come up with its rescue packages for companies, let's say AirAsia needs to borrow money from the government because it needs the money to keep afloat, then it should impose certain conditions about employment of its employees, about investment, or making sure that the customers also benefit, all its stakeholder benefits, not just for the shareholders. So that's one way to, how to say, bring about a positive effect from the policy they're undertaking. Same goes for all the other companies that are requiring government assistance, because it's taxpayers' money. It's your money and our money that is going to help out the corporation.
Okay. What about other speakers? Do you have on that side thoughts, or we can move on for the next question?
I just have one example. Just a few weeks ago, Singapore was rocked by the Hin Long crisis. There's one of the biggest bunkering company in the world, not in Asia. it was that company in Hindong was a very reputable public listed company, very highly regulated, but somehow it managed to beat the system. So whatever it is, to get back on track, company has to be very transparent. If you rugi, you cakap rugi. If you untung, you cakap untung. Don't hide anything. That's my plate to all. Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
Mr. Narak,
Yes.
what are the
Two
last
more. I
questions?
think we have two more questions. Again from Prof. Dr. Gita. Regarding the EPF withdrawal, we agree that we need money circulation and the economic cycle. It's all about spending and buying. But what is your take on this policy on EPF withdrawal? Will it not affect the safety net of many Malaysians, especially in the B40 group?
Maybe I can take this. Yeah, this actually created a lot of yes and no amongst Malaysian, because I think whatever steps taken by any government, or there's sure going to be either a yes or no answer. What I think is that the EPF is probably a good measure to actually withdraw out the money, but I need to put in this word called it, provided that they take out the money for extraordinary measure, provided that this money is for under extraordinary situation in their own personal health, financial health. So it has to be extraordinary. For example, ensuring that the food is being on table, right? So these are very extraordinary situation. Ensuring that they pay their electricity bill and also water bill, because some of them really have a big problem doing that. And as we know, we have to always wash our hands properly. We need to ensure that water cut is avoided. And also some of them they can't pay their room rent. For example, those factory workers. So these are all under very extraordinary situation. Then they can actually consider to take out withdraw out the money. Other than that, I do not encourage, or I don't think it's a very good way just to take it out for other purposes. So in the short run, it will actually be a float for their financial health. But in the long run, if you keep on taking for the next half year or the whole year, it will be a very it will not be a very good thing for the long run.
Okay. The last question. Any more?
Yeah, there's a couple of
two more questions. Maybe
yeah.
we can say
maybe another 2 or 3 more questions. Quick one if we have the time. There's one. In fact, we have listeners even from India who have logged on. There's one question which may be very interesting for everyone. Many people have complimented economic actions taken by other countries like India for the PPP, etc. If you were the finance minister or national economics minister, what would be the 1 or 2 main actions you would take that will have a maximum impact for us in the short or medium term?
anyone to take
Awful question.
finance minister for temporary position can answer on that.
Okay, let me try to do that. It's not. If I were the Prime Minister, the Finance Minister, one thing for sure, there is no right or wrong in doing things. It's only the impact of our actions. The first economic policy is actually you have to do something. You cannot wait for things to happen, and then you have to do it big, and you do it fast. There's a 3 main economic response that we need to do. And another thing is that you have to look into the strategic issues. Whatever you do, I'm not the finance minister. We don't have the exact data. But whatever you do, you have to maintain and increase employment, because every year people keep on graduating. school on the degree schools. You have to reduce the possibility of job losses. You have to think of measures to ease the economic burden of Majikia, Pani Fernandez, etc. We have to think about supporting private sectors, in our case, the SMEs, how to make them relevant and liquid with cash flows, enough cash flows. And we, again, last but not least, as a finance minister, you have to think of how to build the nation after post-COVID-19 from a low base now for the future. Okay, how? And there's, 3-4 months discussion, rapid discussion that we need to do. Okay.
Okay, that's good. Do we want to take one more question, Mr. Nara, or we move on that? I leave it to your any more a good question you would like to take up.
Yes, I think there are a couple of more. There's one from Doris. If global economies do not open up, then we will face shortage of food, i.e. opinion from India and wheat from Australia. What is our government strategy to face the situation?
Okay, anyone can have a very tough on to do that question.
Yeah, maybe like what Nazri said, we are not the government. We can't make decision, but then we can act like if we are the government for this minute, we can actually make decision right now. Let's say, so let's play a role as a government. So basically, to answer your question, if a government do not control the supplies well and do not control reserves well, it will cause a lot of shortages. We in Malaysia, we are quite lucky. We can say that our neighboring countries, especially during this pandemic crisis, neighboring countries are doing pretty okay in sense of controlling the outbreak. Just a quick figure, except for maybe Indonesia, that is Nazri's concern also, right? But our neighboring countries like Thailand and even Asian countries, especially, we can see that like from Vietnam, from South Korea and so on, the Asian economies are actually thriving much more better than the European and North American economies because of very strict SOPs, because they have very strict guidelines to counter this COVID-19. We can see that most Asian countries, even very dense countries like Hong Kong and Taiwan, their infection rate is only, Hong Kong is about 1,051 as of today. Taiwan is only 440. Recovery rate for Hong Kong is about 96%, while Taiwan is about 85%. So same with Vietnam. Vietnam has only got an infection rate of 288. So basically, we can see that these are the economies that are actually moving forward, while others are still fighting and surviving above waters, especially fighting for the healthcare issue. So, Vietnam is actually a producing country, an export country. We can certainly probably import some goods from there. Taiwan is actually also a moving country, developing in IT and so on. So basically, we can actually, and also Thailand, not forgetting, Thailand also is a very agriculture-based country. They have very good control of the outbreak. Probably every day, we are only seeing less than 20 outbreaks per day from Thailand. So not only we depend on India or like you say, Australia, we have very good neighbors that can actually supply products to us. So we can actually look into that.
Thanks, Rod. I have something to add to what you said.
Yeah.
We can actually supply, yes, a lot of the agricultural commodities from our neighbors. But what I'm seeing during this MCO shutdown is that everybody suddenly become a backyard farmer and homegrown cook, I have Facebook friends who are growing their tauge. At 7 days you start in the beginning of the week, by the end of the 5th day you get your tauge. And somebody planted radish or carrots by the 5th week they already have their carrots. So everybody is becoming conscious of the fact that they could be growing their own food. So in a kind of like a hyper localized supply chain, everybody's whatever you can do on your own, even in a condo, you start to grow on your own. So there's this, if it is a shift in the mental attitude, that as you do as much as you can to grow your own food, you can see a boom in the urban farming, in the do-it-yourself agriculture type of situation set up. And we may see new models coming up. I've been actually proposing to a friend of mine to have his land sublet out by the square feet to urban condo dwellers, so that even though you're living in a condo, you can have your 100 square feet of land growing some stuff, and then you can actually get the food supplied from the garden to your condo while you don't have to own or go to the farm, you know, that sort of thing. So a lot of these things could be the new trend coming up. One of the boom industries in this during this period is the agricultural home agriculture supply sector. The nursery farmers are selling all their nursery plants and their pots and their growing utensils and the fertilizer, and that's booming. A lot of them are doing that right now. So growing your own food in your own backyard is I think a trend that might emerge from this.
Okay, that's a good idea. Become our own farmer at home. Yeah, I think we no need to go to pasar to buy any more veggies. Can plant everything. That's great. That's a good thing. Okay, Mr. Nada, can we
Yes.
have the final one?
Yeah,
And
I think, yeah.
And on this, we need
Okay.
all our participants, and later we're gonna have a snapshot.
Yes.
And yeah, Mr. Nada,
Yeah.
can we have the final
This
one?
is the last question. It's question and comment from Mr. Ramesh Kailat from India. In India, there are many small and micro industries which may close. Hence, we expect prices of some commodities to go up in the short term to meet excess demand over supply. The Prime Minister of India has also talked of self-reliance, probably expecting reduced imports. What do you think of the local situation?
Anyone can?
Yeah, I think I'll just add on to what Mr. Khoo just said just now. Yes, actually, Ramesh, you have actually got the answer already. The Prime Minister of India has talked about self-reliance. So what Mr. Khoo was saying that, yeah, of course, we can't do everything on self-reliance. We can't possibly plant our own rice. You need a paddy field to do that. But basically, start with very small things like vegetation. We can have our own reliance, self-sufficient, just good enough for a family. In Malaysia, there's so many people rushing to buy bread during the first phase of MCO. Everywhere, breads were snapped up. So what did Malaysians do? They were so fed up, and basically everyone is starting to bake breads now. They start to bake, and they say, we are doing our own home baked bread. And it's much more healthier in a way, and at the same time, it's more convenient. So the Prime Minister, I agree with the Prime Minister of India, it's actually called self-reliance. So you are self-sufficient within your own family. And so just adding on to what Mr. Khoo actually answered just now.
Okay. I think we're toward to a lifetime for non-Muslim, and I think for the Muslims, the fasting, and I think we move on our wrap-up section, and I just conclude. So what is from the speaker 1, 2, 3? I go. What is like I'm gonna do a wrap-up section on the what's Roy saying, like bad economy. That's a negative, positive thing. Deep freeze, great lockdown. On the other part is like real estate, online business is moving on. Yeah, there's when input from the was Nazri, like EPF withdrawal, Machikia, Suji, Tony Fernandez. Yeah, looking forward, all these things is come on this part where we can seeing what we're reliable, like borrowing money. Us is a big concern, and I move on the second topic was Nazri was sharing like zero businesses, debts, big, small, bank loan. There's many loans. Yeah, I mean doing goods or job loss. I think it's a millions of job is uh, closed down. So I think a lot of people have to stay home and do some other job that's given like yeah. So move on like airlines. Airlines is very totally affected. Uh, of course, it's affect the tourism section. And what I was looking at another part is like what Nazri was sharing about the kids. They want to be a Instagram YouTuber, and they don't want to be what they want to do. We also don't know that is the job is like example like a job. We need like foreigner. Why we need more foreigner or local don't want to do? Now is the time our local need to go in, like a Grab driver or Food Panda driver. Whoever lost job, I think you are as a director, just do it as the job. You need to do it, and moving on like a good demand, lower down interest rate. We need to spend money more or less. We need to give a more locals, buy local. What does add on by Roy say buy more local products and give a support to our local products. That's a good or the points of add on. I move on with Mr. Khoo on the wrap up, and yes, a lot of good thing. We're saying the second wave. We don't know when is the second wave of virus will coming. They need to prepare now. Yes, before the second wave to come. I think save some money. I think plant our own vegetables and become our own farmer. I think a lot of job might be jobs and a lot of affected. I think another part of World Bank must have to look on this thing like I think stock market is crashing. But I think the food industry is it's got to be what I was reading 3 days back. Might be when recovery time that might be food industry, maybe vegetables. They're not able to supply. Mean too much of demand. I think that part we will see how the government. Of course, we are not a government, but we can give some ideas to the government because we facing the situation or people is facing on that. And part of the other part of the was a question from our audience was given like what is sharing by public health. Public health is most important. B40s, yes, we need to look into that. It's a lot of suffering. And foreign worker, commodity prices, it's all have to be, we need to address, say, the government can be helped, or we need to take our chance to move on forward. And yeah, all the wrap up, anyone to give any final things to our audience, just in 2-3 words. Can you can start it with, I will go start it with Mr. Nazri. Any of your thoughts and final one, our audience are listening.
Final thoughts. Maybe I can summarize in 3 W's. Number one is willing to spend money. Roy, I do agree with you. We need to spend wisely, but we need to spend money to help Machikia. If not, she cannot put food on the tables or pay the bank loans. The second W, maybe we can put some petition, whatever, for the banks to reduce the bank conditions. The moratorium 6 months thing is good. But after 6 months, what would happen? Because now the trend is many Malaysians are losing their jobs. And maybe the third W is the willing to help the SMEs to climb back again. To start producing, to start exporting. Okay, I think that's the 3 W's I can summarize for the session. Jevan?
Okay. What about Mr. Khoo?
I'd like to end by saying that during this period of the MCO, as a result of the pandemic crisis, probably everybody who depend on the income has less income. So we find that we are less income rich. Our revenue and our money is not so much. But on the other hand, we find that we are very rich in time. Before, when we were very busy earning income, we were very time poor. Now we are time rich beyond expectation. We're so wealthy with time, a lot of people don't know what to do with their time. So we don't know how long this pandemic situation will last. Whether it's 2 months, 3 months, 6 months, 2 years, we don't know. So we have the uncertainty, but we have the certainty that there is this time. So in this time and wealth, it's a good opportunity to reinvent yourself, to prepare for the next coming phases of the economy. The new economy is going to come in terms of new industries, new sectors, new growth engines. And I think the indicators are very clear what they're going to be. They're going to be digital based, they're going to be personal based, they're going to be so many different aspects compared to the old way. And if one takes the opportunity to reinvent yourself, even the nasi lemak seller, the makcik, can also reinvent herself. There will be a lot of opportunity when the recovery comes, and you can take advantage of it when you're ready. So that's the short message I think I'd like to have. Thanks.
Okay, Roy, from your final one.
Like I said, I like to leave a positive note rather than a very negative note. Like negative, we always hear too many negative stories through our WhatsApp and so on. We are bombarded nearly every day through Facebook and all this. But a lot of people also do not really touch on the positive note that this is not all loss, and not everything is the worst. Probably just to summarize what Nazri and Mr. Khoo also said, we have to support our own local industry. That is very important. Help our own self before we go over to think about global arena. So as a start, just help our own local industry. We can basically do that very easily, and also like what Mr. Khoo said, this is a new economy. It's actually like a restart button, restarting button. A lot of companies, I believe, before that, everyone, they were in their own comfort zone. They were very comfortable with the business model. Some of them probably will say, well, it's okay. I still got another 20 more years or 10 more years. That will be the time when I retire. So it will still hang on. So a lot of people were clinging on this idea that, well, I do have a good income. I have a good business model, and probably it will last me for another 10 to 20 years until my next retirement. Now, I would say that a lot, because of this pandemic thing, it started to create a lot of new ideas, a lot of new reforms and restructuring. One of it is that I'm from the logistics industry. I was also very comfortable meeting customer face to face, discussing with clients. We have a face-to-face meeting. That is a lot of relation-based business. And we were all very comfortable, and we didn't really think much about online and e-commerce until the pandemic really hit us. And we have actually looked into the e-commerce business right now, which is actually booming more than 200% since MCO started. Businesses, they have actually gone beyond that. Like, for example, like I know a gym operator. That day he was just asking me, how am I going to operate? I operate a gym. There's nobody coming in for the next 3 to 4 months. So he says that he's basically dead in a way. So I said, wait, you don't really have to look that negative. Why not you start selling gym equipments or fitness equipment online? So what he did, he has his contacts and suppliers. He's selling on Lazada, Shopee right now, and I heard that pretty good business. At least he can sustain his monthly expenses. Another one is also I know a proprietor of a bicycle shop. So during MCO, he sold a lot of fitness training machines on bicycle, because a lot of people, we cannot even exercise out of our home during MCO. So these people, they think out of the box. Real estate agents, they start to do virtual what do you call this? A virtual tour. And some people even bought houses just by going through virtual tour. So these are something that the ICT has actually taken a very big advantage and help towards the new economy or the new norm right now.
Okay, that's great. That's great. I think we have a very good wrap up from our speaker, final one. And also